On this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, the Solomon Islands welcome USNS Mercy, but kick out a U.S. Coast Guard cutter. Hi, I'm your host, Sal Mercaglano. Welcome to this episode of What's Going On with Shipping. If you're new to the channel, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. So, story hit the news today about the arrival of the USNS Mercy, one of two hospital ships operated by the U.S. Navy's Military Sealift Command in the Solomon Islands. Now, I am a big, huge fan of the two hospital ships for a very good reason. Got it right here. This is my actual cap that I wore when I was deployed aboard USNS Comfort, the sister ship of USNS Mercy, during the first Persian Gulf War. It's pretty beat up. I had it for a long time, and it's a pretty shot. Anyway, this story today is really important because while the Solomon Islands welcomed USNS Mercy, they were not as friendly when the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Oliver Henry attempted to come into port. So, before we jump into the story, if you're new to the channel, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so be alerted about new videos as they come out. All right, let's jump into this story. So here's a story from the Solomon Island Broadcasting Company, which reported the arrival of USNS Mercy, already receiving dental and surgical bookings. Now, the Mercy is out in what's called Pacific Partnership. This is about every 2 years, each of the hospital ships go out. Usually they stagger each other, with one hospital ship going to the Pacific, Mercy, and then Comfort going down to Central and South America. So Mercy has been out since July. I think the report here it is. Navy hospital ship departs for Pacific Partnership in 2022. This is back in May. So in May, she left San Diego and has been out there ever since. Operating it, she's just coming back from the Philippines now, stopping at Guam on the way in. So the story here is that she arrives at the Solomon Islands. And according to the public affairs officer on board, that it's under the Pacific Partnership program, says the Pacific Partnership compromises four main lines of effort, which are medical, engineering, humanitarian relief, and host nation outreach. The ship's commodore and some staff will meet with planners from both the Solomon Islands and the U.S. on the ground staff on logistics of the ship's operation during its stay in the country. The Mercy is expected to start taking its patients after its opening ceremony tomorrow. This is the track of Mercy. She was coming in again from Guam into the anchorage off of Huanari, which is basically Guadalcanal from World War II, if this all sounds familiar. This is the island literally 80 years ago this month, August 7th, where the U.S. 1st Marine Division, supported by the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Coast Guard, landed the first offensive action of World War II in the Pacific. And now here's Mercy in the Solomon Islands. Here's her on marine traffic, showing that she arrived in the anchorage, all set to come in. And if you go to their Facebook page, this is the Pacific Partnership Facebook page, we already see pictures of smiles across the islands. This was just 7 hours ago. And you already see crews at work. You see a dental team here in operation helping out. It is a very positive program, Pacific Partnership. You see this, it's been going on in Palau, in Vietnam, in the Philippines. They were over in Guam. Just a huge outreach program, just phenomenal. And if you really want to see more of it, just scroll through the Pacific Partnership Facebook page. And they've got images here from their entire stay on board. Absolutely positive. Of course, you would want to see a ship like this in your port. But the question it raises is, why then did the government of the Solomon Islands just the other day reject the arrival of a U.S. Coast Guard cutter? Here's the story from Reuters on G Captain. U.S. Coast Guard can't bunker in the Solomon Islands. This is the fast response cutter, U.S. Coast Guard cutter Oliver Henry. Now, Oliver Henry has been out in the Pacific doing a variety of different missions, including fishery protection for Southern Pacific Islands, and also humanitarian relief, delivering water to some drought-stricken islands out in the Pacific. Yet this story here is really unbelievable. It goes in that the Coast Guard vessel was unable to enter the Solomon Islands for a routine port call because the Solomon Islands government did not respond to a request for it to refuel and reprovision. The islands government did not immediately answer a Reuters request for comment. The Solomon Islands has had tense relationship with the U.S. and its allies since striking a security pact with China back in May. The Oliver Henry was on a patrol for illegal fishing in the South Pacific for a regional fishing agency when it failed to obtain entry to refuel at Honoria. That's the exact port where Mercy is right now, the Solomon's capital. The U.S. vessel was diverted to Papua New Guinea. And matter of fact, she is currently south of Port Moresby. It looks like she made her port call into New Guinea and is sailing westbound right now in the Tasman Sea. Here she is right here, just outside of Port Moresby. The Solomon Islands are all the way over here. That's a long distance to sail, by the way, for fuel. Hopefully they weren't too short on fuel to make that voyage. And the story goes on here. The British Navy declined to comment on social media requests that the patrol vessel HMS Spey, also taking part in Operation Island Chief, this is that fishing monitor, uh, basically was declined port access by the Solomons Island. Solomon Islands and Beijing have ruled out a Chinese military base on the islands, although a leaked draft showed the security agreement would allow the Chinese Navy to dock and replenish. This is all part of the Chinese Builtin Road Initiative. So the Solomon Islands are right down here. Here you see China, and here you see Chinese supply lines, one across the Pacific, through the Panama Canal, up into Europe. Of course, their supply also goes to the United States. Not sure why it's not showing this again. And then also through the South China Sea, through the Indian Ocean, and up through the Suez Canal into the Mediterranean. But you may ask, well, why here in the Solomon Islands? It's actually very simple. Should the South China Sea be shut to them, not by the United States, but by smaller nations, Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, Singapore, then Chinese ships can route either through Indonesian waters, but they may be excluded from there. If not, they would have to route around Australia, south of Australia to head this way, which means they would probably need a refueling base or a security base somewhere. And that's where the Solomon Islands come in. The Chinese are continually trying to establish multiple layers and multiple chains of their supply lines. If they can't go through the South China Sea, they can go around the Solomon Islands. Why is China building icebreakers? So that they can go up through the Bering Sea around northern Russia to get to Europe if they have to. China is always looking at alternative methods for getting their ships out. The fact that the Solomon Islands rejected the refueling rights for the Coast Guard cutter Oliver Henry, but have welcomed open arms, the Mercy is a big indicator for me. They obviously will accept the humanitarian aid. That's a big issue. Soft power is a very powerful one, but pushing away a U.S. Coast Guard cutter tells me that they're very concerned about what the Chinese may view with a military vessel coming in. Now, Mercy is military. It's operated by the U.S. Navy, specifically the Military Sea Lift Command, but it has military personnel on board. But again, they're not going to shy that away because of the aid and relief it brings to their citizens in the Solomon Islands. This is part of that diplomatic political game that's being played out in a lot of nations around the world. Mercy arriving is great. I think Pacific Partnership is great. I think when comfort goes out to Latin and South America, it's great. We need to do more of this. We need that soft power element. But at the same time, we have to be telling the Solomon Islands, listen, 80 years ago, we saved you. We came to your liberation. We rescued Guadalcanal from the Japanese as part of the larger campaign to basically neutralize Imperial Japan after the attacks in December of 1941. But 80 years later, almost to the day, the invasion of Guadalcanal, here they are turning away the U.S. Coast Guard, which, by the way, the only Coast Guard Medal of Honor in the entire World War II was won at Guadalcanal, Douglas Munro, on a landing craft. Absolute an insult to the U.S. Coast Guard, and yet here's Mercy coming into harbor now. I think we should keep Mercy there. There's no reason we shouldn't, but there should be a full-on diplomatic press against the island government, the government of Solomon Islands, to find out why exactly the Oliver Henry and maybe HMS Spey were not allowed to come into port and refuel. That is a critical issue. And you're not talking about a lot of fuel for the Spey and the Oliver Henry. They're smaller vessels, they're patrol boats. These are not large vessels. And, being denied permission to refuel could seriously jeopardize a small vessel too if it doesn't have enough fuel to make it to the next port. I'm not sure how much fuel they had left on board before they sailed for Papua New Guinea, especially because they had been running around the islands providing fishing protection and humanitarian relief. Anyway, big issue regarding ship basing rights, ship entry rights, and the fact that the Solomon Islands, which played a decisive role in the Second World War, is now shaping up to be playing another decisive role in the control of the Pacific. Who is going to have it? Is it China through the Belt and Road Initiative, or is it the US advocating for open seas and open trade? Big question looming on the horizon. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, take a moment, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, give it a thumbs up, share it across social media, and if you can, support the channel. You can do that in two ways. One, hit that super thanks button below, contribute directly to the page, or head over to Patreon. The link will come up here at the end of the video and become a patron of the page. That helps support the page, keep the page running, and most importantly, allow me to get into resources like paid subscriptions to news magazines so I can put all this together for you. Hope you enjoyed today's video. Until next time, the Sal signing off.